5-Star Founder is a podcast created by founders for founders. I believe everyone you ever meet knows something you don't. Each episode features a founder from a variety of backgrounds, sectors, and entrepreneurial stages, with whom I hope to learn, celebrate, understand, and get a deeper insight into their world. We will cover everything from what drove our founders to start their company, to what keeps them awake at night, biggest regret to date, as well as their career highs and lows in their journey so far. Katy Howell is the founder and CEO of Immediate Future. The company was started way back when it was all about blogs, MySpace, and things that we have long forgotten about. Back then, Facebook was literally just a physical book. Twitter was an ornithologist's hobby. Clubhouse used to be called Oceana in Kingston. Immediate Future is one of the UK's most respected social media agencies. When the team is when the team isn't busy winning awards or delivering talks at well-respected institutes, they are working with household names and global brands. The company focuses on not having ninjas, rock stars, or gurus, but a passionate team of serious marketers with expertise in social media. Anyone in business knows making it past the first year is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever do. Making it past the 5 years is rare. Rarer still are companies who've made it past the decade mark. Our guest today, Katy, her company is closer to the 20-year mark. So I personally hope to discover what Katy's secrets to reinvention, relevance, and recruitment is. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Katy.
Hi, Sid.
Katy, thank you for being on our podcast and giving us the chance to talk to you and ask you lots of questions about what's happening within the world of social media. Firstly, for the audience, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, yes. So I'm Katy Howell and I run an agency called Immediate Future. We're an independent social media agency that this May turns 17 years old. We were born in the same year as Facebook kind of went more public. We focus on working with clients when they get serious about social, when they've stopped flapping around trying to get followers and want to make pretty Instagram pictures and actually want something that will deliver a business impact. And our vision within the business is to break the social boring. So there are two core factors to what we do, which is get serious about social and break the social boring so that you grab the attention you need to grab within social.
I guess the first thing is, when you say serious, are we talking companies of a certain size and they're like your sweet spot? And how did you find out that was your sweet spot or the kind of companies that you wanted to work with?
Always been our sweet spot, to be honest with you. We've always worked with this kind of company, so they tend to be large, well-known brands, but not what I would consider tier one. So the Unilevers and the PepsiCos and the really big brands like that we don't work with. We work both B2B and B2C, but we tend to work with the challenger brands, what we used to call back in the day the challenger brands, but what today, because that tends to mean disruptive brands now, what I'm talking about are tier 2 to tier 5 brands. That's everything from Sony Music and Psycho to Mission Foods, which do tacos and wraps, all the way up to, on the B2B side, we've worked with Thomson Reuters, Fujitsu, IBM, quite a lot of tech brands, but also Bayer. You get the gist. The gist is that we work with brands that you will have heard of and my mum will have heard of.
Yeah, that's the problem with people in digital media, where the only way my parents will know what I do is, let's say an article gets featured on actual printed newspaper, or I were to get interviewed on the BBC, and only then they'll be like, oh, I see what you do. No matter how many videos I've sent of me at work, or I've even tried to kind of draw a diagram, say, this is what I do, mum and dad. And it's just like, okay, I just don't understand. So that's the issue we have in digital marketing. Firstly, could you tell us what Immediate Future looked like when you started versus what it is a transition to now?
Okay, for starters, you need to understand that I am an accidental agency owner. I left DDB because I thought there was a thing in these kind of moderation boards, which kind of the fallout of those moderation boards will be Mumsnet, for instance. But there were loads of them back then and lots of groups and things like that. And so what I thought was there was this great idea that actually, how fabulous. Brands can actually have proper conversations with their customers. This
Mm.
is the new wave. This is Web 2.0, as it was ghastly name, but it was called at the time. And I thought, I think there's an opportunity. So I left ETB and I set up on my own as a freelancer. Partly also, just had a second child. It was chaos here. And a couple of years in, I'd got 20 clients and was turning over a lot, and it was just me, and I was nearly dead. I think it's the only way of putting it. And I got a bit poorly. My mum, who ran her own agency too, said to me, you've got two choices: cut some of the clients you've got or get some help. So I got some help. I got some administrative help. So officially, we say we launched in 2004, but I actually set us up at the end of 98, but it was freelance. So the company incorporated in 2003, just for tax reasons, and then became an agency in 2004. And I think if you've gone through that whole kind of process, sort of acquiring employees with very little structure, I just had work and I needed to give it to someone. I didn't have a clue how to run an agency or a business. It was never an ambition of mine. I just had more work than I could deal with.
I was doing my research. You actually studied genetics and plant studies at uni, and then you went on to, I guess you had a grad role, and then you went to work for DDB as the head of marketing. How did that actually happen? How did that transition go from that to actually being a freelancer to being an agency owner?
I come from a generation, I think it's going to be more common this year. We'll start to see it happen again, which is the squiggly career. So yes, my passion was science. I have an advantage in that I was quite good at everything at school. Do you know what I mean? Apart from PE, terrible at PE. So, but I really liked science, and particularly I did plant sciences genetics, which has effectively allowed me to become what you'd probably know better as GM crops now, but it didn't have the name. And I really believed I could feed the world. I was very purpose driven as a youngster, and I joined CND and skipped school to go on marches and did lots of protests around Greenham Common. Yeah, I got into lots of naughty things and good things and positive things. And I wanted to create crops that were drought resistant and would help feed the world. And then I got out of university and realized they could do that already. And it had nothing to do with the capability and everything to do with the economy. So I was really disillusioned. I also did not fancy working in a lab, because it was really boring. And most of the work is lab work and it's really boring. I started in sales. I did telesales for a couple of years to make some money. I was going to go to Australia. I had this mad vision, but I kept getting promoted. I kept doing really well. Bought my first house at 23.
Oh my God.
And then at 24, 25, somewhere around there. It's difficult to remember, so long ago, but I got really bored again. There's a pattern to this. I got bored and I thought I need to do something else. So I was working at that point with an exhibition company, and I began to learn marketing. Now, my mother is in marketing and my sister is in PR and copywriting. She did a lot of investor relations. So I come from a background. So I got myself to understand what I was doing. And at 26, I got married after meeting my husband. I got married him 9 weeks later, and still married to him, by the way, 28 years later. Wow. I don't remember how long it is. So I had a bit of a whirlwind thing happen there. And then I met someone who met someone. I've always had a love of technology. At 16, I demanded to go to night school and learn to DOS program. So I've always love technology and love messing around with it, but also like comms, and I like science. I'm basically a nuisance. I like everything. I'm curious about everything. And then I landed a job at DDB, which was fantastic. It was really good for me. It was back in the day when it was BMP DDB, and there was no OMD at the time. And it really much more on the business development side, but really beefing up my marketing skills. And then along came digital, and it was just serendipity for me.
I'm going to ask you a controversial question. I was actually reading this on Twitter the other day, and it just said entrepreneurs, it's an unpopular opinion to say this or thing to say, but entrepreneurs are just generally a bit smarter than the local kind of general population. And it really made me think about my journey and people I've known. So from the sounds of it, this is like you were a kind of a rebellious person from a young age, and you had lots of passions and hobbies, and you followed through on whatever you decided you wanted to do. And also you happen to have a back entrepreneurial family, I guess. So you mentioned your mother had her own agency. How did you kind of, not at that time, but like if you were to look back, how did you channel all those things into what you decided to do at that time?
I know that I'm fearful of things, but I tend to do it anyway. I really cannot stand being told I can't do something. It's a trigger for me. If somebody says, you can't write, I'll learn to write. If somebody says, you can't do this, I'll go, I'll show you. I think the people I've met who run agencies, and I don't think that's quite the same as entrepreneurs, the vast majority of the ones that I have met that are successful tend to be driven more by their passion. And I really love what I do. I still love what I do.
I guess what I want to ask you more about is like, how did you discover what you loved, what you wanted? Because I'm sure you didn't wake up one day when you were 23, 24, think, you know what, I'm going to run a marketing agency. And you also mentioned you're like an accidental agency owner. What were the kind of crazy mixes of coincidences that led you to immediate future?
I mentioned earlier, it's curiosity. So I play with things. I find it very difficult not to play with things, to work. I mean, I know how Microsoft, all the little buttons on Microsoft that other people don't know. I know I can build a presentation in about 20 minutes because I know where everything is. I know how to do it. And that's just because I spent one evening fiddling with it and trialing. I really am that person that presses all the buttons and never reads the instructions. And I think there's a couple of things. Curiosity is really important. My mother used to call me a why child. Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why? And I think I've never stopped. It's a very strong thread with people who do find what they love, is that they've pretty much tried everything as well. And I'm very lucky. I grew up with parents who told me I can do anything, and it really didn't matter how I did it or how I got there. They supported me regardless of it. And I think the go for it button was kind of drilled into it. Just do it. Just get on with it if that's what you want to do. And I did try a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely failed at many of them. And yes, it's, as I said, it's very serendipitous. So I don't think you can actually say there is a formula to being an agency owner or a formula to being a business owner, that it's nothing to do with how you do it. It has to do with what's here and how quickly you learn and how much you listen and hear what's happening around you. So it did take me a while to get the hang of running an agency. But here's the thing. I went and talked to loads of people. I said, how do you do this? What are you doing? What does it look like in a PR agency versus an ad agency? How does it look? What sort of staff should I hire? How do you hire people? How do you do this? And I just asked lots of friends. I'm a networker, so I learned. So I think learning and curiosity are probably the two things that I'd say. If you can do those two things, you will make it, because as long as you're driven by the passion, you'll do it. You'll find a way.
What were some of the things that you really had to work hard on? And obviously some things like your people skills come naturally to you. It could just be a whole bunch of things that you really had to kind of think, you know what, I need to get this done and I need to push myself to do it.
Yeah, writing is definitely, I learned to write in a scientific way, in an analytical way. That is not writing for marketing. I write a lot of op-eds and things now. As my finance manager says to me, because she sits near my office, she can hear it when I'm writing because I'm growling and grinding my teeth. I really hate writing. I know how to do it. I'll force myself to do it, but I really dislike it. I dislike having to put words together. I don't string words together very well. I'm not logical. I know what I mean. But so writing I've had to uplift that. There's also another part to that. So the maths never fazed me. And I have managed our accounts and understanding what those numbers mean. I have no problem at it. I'm happy to look at a spreadsheet full of numbers. It doesn't bore me to death. I love creativity, have no problem with that. But managing people, you think connecting, it would make you good at managing people, but it doesn't make you a good leader.
Could you expand on that?
The thing is, I will make connections, but the reality is the reason I make good connections is I want people to like me. So I will sell to them almost. Yeah, I'll go, yeah, you're great at this. We should do that. Which works brilliantly in networking. I've had to learn to be a leader. I've had to learn to shut my mouth and stop overselling things. I need to help people see their own path, their own journey, understand what they want, be more empathetic than just assuming I know how to lead. And I think that has been a really immense journey. I don't think I was a good or clever or smart boss to begin with. I think I've learnt it.
One thing you mentioned really early on was you had 20 clients before you even kind of realized you needed to get serious. I mean, I guess that comes from this kind of natural effort or this kind of networking ability that you had. Could you talk us through like your first super serious client and how that came about?
Yes. Well, I'd say there's two things. First is, yes, I'm a networker. By that, I don't mean I go out, although I do when we used to be able to go out and get pissed chatting to people. But actually, when I talk about networking, I mean, I never lose a connection. I'll keep connected to people, even when they move on, even when they change jobs. I'm interested in people. I find it fascinating what people do. So when I talk about being networked, it meant that I always stayed in touch with people. Remember, I did a BD role, so I was already connected to quite a lot of people who are in marketing. But also I was connected to a lot of juniors that were getting older like me and getting more and more senior jobs, and we helped each other out. And I've always been a real believer in helping somebody else out. So our first big client was EMI, and I won that before we actually set the agency up, working with, at the time, Robbie Williams, Lily Allen, and the Gorillas. So helping the brands use blogs and MySpace at the time. Now, the projects were quite small because there wasn't, Facebook and Twitter did not appear on the horizon, and using message boards. It was a very natural thing. Winning that piece of business was really not a pitch because nobody knew what the hell was going on over here. And I literally had a conversation with their digital director at the time at EMI and said, I think there's something really big in this, blah, 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 and sold them this idea that nobody else had really thought about. And they said, yeah, we'll give it a go. And then they gave it a go and thought it was great. And then we began to move to monthly fees and it all worked. It was just, I made it up.
I think a lot of the founders I've been speaking to have said something similar. But what I want to kind of scratch the surface is like, I'm sure it wasn't just kind of as plain sailing as you make it sound, because you'd have had to be in the room with someone and they would have had to look into the whites of your eyes and be convinced that they are spending money wisely and this is something that they want to do. So that probably was a 15-year journey for you to actually be in the room with someone and say, yep, this is the person to do it. What I want to know is like, so you went on this kind of retainer with them, I guess. And when did you realize that, shit, this is serious because I've got to actually hire someone to help me? And I think you mentioned the first people that you brought in was help you with admin. When did that penny drop in a way to say, yeah, I need to get serious because there's opportunity here?
About 6 months later. Well, it didn't take me very long. Once I began to work out what I was doing. We have changed shape so often, but then so has the industry I'm in. I mean, when I started, there was no term social media. So we officially took on employees in 2004, became an agency. I mean, in 2006, we could then use Facebook, but there were no Facebook pages, and Twitter. So our first campaigns ran there. And then I hit gold. I struck the vein that propelled us, and that I did a project with Sony Europe. It was just to support, they had a series of ads going out. And back in the day, what happened is all the ads would be made, and then there was this thing like trying to get bloggers involved in the ad creation and then getting the ads out on social media. It was very, very early days, not where we are now. Sounds utterly ridiculous now. But back then, it was a really extending the value of your TV campaign. And Sony Europe had 3 glorious ads, one with the balls coming down the San Franciscan. Then we had paint blowing up in Glasgow building. Yeah. And then the last one was bunnies, which was New York stop motion bunnies. To promote their Bravia TVs at the time. And we did a great job, and it was my first sort of real foray into large-scale blogger relations at the time. And after that project finished, it was really successful, and I spoke to the head of comms at the time, who said, we want to work with you on retainer. I'm like, yeah, great. Fantastic. She said, like, so you'll need to pitch, blah, 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 but I'd like to do what you're doing. I think it's the future of marketing and comms. And I said, great, fantastic, thinking this will be fine. And then she told me the budget. And I think it's the only time in my life I've ever shut up. I think it was something like, it was certainly over £1 million. There were 3 of us, me, the admin, and an account manager. And I went, there aren't enough of us to do this. And she said, it's okay. She used to work for Byte, which was kind of pulled together for Apple. And she said, I'll wait, I'll help you hire. And we literally, the agency got built into its next phase with 10 people with Sony at its core. And that was a really interesting path because as a consequence, we began to build notoriety, start to work with other large brands.
Do you think that moment almost like transformed you as an entrepreneur to say, you know what, now I'm responsible for 10 people? And of course, no one wants to be held hostage to one major client because they walk away, you're screwed. Is that something that you even thought about at that time, or?
No, I haven't got a clue. Really, honestly, I didn't. I did a few years later, and I did take on advisors that helped me. So that works. We did lose Sony, and they were a large amount of our business. Sony, post the 2008 financial recession, began to bring its marketing more global, and they went back to global agencies, which happens. We had a really good long run with them, I think about 7 years. And we went from a large agency to a small agency as a consequence of that. And that was a learning curve. But I found it very hard to get out from under the wing of Sony at the time. Not their fault, my fault. It's not that I didn't understand, it's just that I was servicing that client.
It's almost you're their in-house team, or like they kind of recruited you to just build and look after this without taking any of the risk almost.
Yeah, but they were brilliant. They were absolutely that. The marketing and comms team at the time were just amazing. They were doing incredible work. It was just such fun. I was just enjoying myself, to be honest with you. We were working on cracking campaigns alongside the likes of Fallon, who were the heyday before the sort of Mother and Adam and Eve came along. I was just enjoying my life, and it was quite good because the consequence of that was I also had 2 small children. I could spend time with them. It was good fun. And I had a team at the time who were just amazing, just as entrepreneurial as you can get as a team. Because we were breaking new ground. We were going, how can we use Twitter before Twitter had ads? How can we use, when we launched brands on Facebook, when there were no Facebook pages? So everything was very pioneering and really interesting. We were trialing everything at the same time in comms.
One question I want to ask you, a lot of people who may be listening, hi mum, by the way, people who may not be familiar with the agency model. So what I want to just step back is, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to just ask you anyway, were there any people that you look to for inspiration? For example, other business owners or other entrepreneurs, even if they weren't directly related to the agency world, including your family members?
Yes. I mean, my mum was just amazing, always was. But I would say there were a few people who had an enormous impact on me. One of them was Ashley Freeline, who set up and ran e-consultancy, who supported me and was just an ear. He wasn't running an agency, but, really smart. And then there was Matt Morrison, absolute genius guy, who he would light fires all over the place, and I'd be rushing from one thing to the next going, oh my God, look what he's found. Just fabulous. I was very lucky. And I've always been one to be part of groups, to find the groups. So it's very difficult to pin one person, but it's part of the reason I do this Pay It Forward is a lot of the people I surrounded myself with, and over the last 20 years that have helped me, people I can never pay back. When we turned 10, we had a big party, and I invited all the people that had helped us, and I think it was about over 400 people that had helped us one way or another.
Wow.
And so I have to pay it forward. The only way I can do it is to help someone else out, and that's the only way I can give back to the people that I rang them up in tears. I mean, Spencer Gallagher was one. I rang him up, absolutely bawling my eyes out, going, oh my God, I've totally messed it up. I don't know I don't know what I'm doing. And him and Peter Hall came and straightened us all out and put all the lines back in place, and also supported me emotionally. So I'd love to be able to say, as a really straightforward answer, I would say to anybody who's setting up a business right now, your connections matter way more than you think they do. And it is never about one person or one book or one way of doing things, because, hey, who wants to do what somebody else does? Try, find another way.
Wow.
It's actually about finding as many people as you possibly can to help you out, to give you, and I don't mean work for nothing. I mean, the people you'll chew the fat over with. And I used to go off down the pub or have a chat to people, and I'll be helping them as much as they help me. But the point being is understanding and learning lots of different perspectives is incredibly invaluable. And then giving yourself time to digest that and try it, change it. Try it, change it, try it, change it, fail, and it will work. I know that there's all these terrible quotes, fail fast and do that. But in reality, that is life. Life is just not perfect.
Katy, actually, one of the kind of selfish reasons I started this podcast is just so that I can have conversations with people like yourself, because I kind of find myself with my lifelong friends who are in kind of accounting or serious careers that won't ever go into entrepreneurship. I love them, they love me, but there are certain parts of my life they just won't understand. Or people I'm seeing, or people I was seeing at the time, wouldn't understand why I get up at 12 o'clock at night and get my laptop out and actually start writing an email, because the buck sort of stuff stops with you. And I'm sure you've been there many times. One day I was reading e-consultancy, and I used to read this religiously when I was working in sales for my previous role. And I think I saw you doing a piece about something, and I was like, who the hell is this person with like crazy hair? And the moment I typed in your name on LinkedIn, I was like, oh yeah, this person's, there's no single doubt this is this person. So that's how it kind of, and also I would go to, not e-commerce expo, but you'd be all in all the sort of talking circuits, and you had that kind of distinctive look in a way. So there was no doubt it was you. What I want to ask you is, like, being a woman, and at the moment there's a whole load of groups, clubs, books, everything you can imagine aimed at like female entrepreneur, female entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. And you, as a woman and also as a person of color, what kind of struggles did you face? Or is that even a conversation? Is that even a relevant conversation?
Yeah, very relevant. In fact, one of the challenges is that I met a few in a networking group recently, which is that our industry in particular is utterly filled with one type of person, a male, homogenous, traditional, kind of in a clique all of their own. And for a long time, I tried really, it was one of the biggest personal mistakes I made was try to be like them. Not only did I fail, but it creates a sort of hole inside of you where you can't be you. And I would wear suits and a scarf, and I needed to look like everybody else thought I should look. But I don't look like an agency person, regardless of my hair that does its own thing. I'm not an agency person because I'm the wrong colour and I'm a gobby shitey woman. And so I was better off being a gobby shitey woman. It just made more sense. So I would say that our industry is suffering terribly from a lack of diversity, and that much of the male hierarchy that exists in agencies, that is really designed as a patriarchal suppression, is not the way women run businesses. And women do not behave like this. And in fact, I remember being told by a very extraordinarily longevous, I don't think that's a word, I'm making words up now, but a guy who'd been in the industry for like 50 years or whatever, been agency side for 50 years, that there was no emotion in business. And I cannot tell you, as I turned 55 last week, so I'm now been around a bit, that's bollocks. And in particular in agency and marketing, it is emotional. I really do give a shit about our clients. I really do care about people. And I can't run a business not doing that. Not doing that was worse. Trying to be something I'm not. And so, yes, I think that the female entrepreneurship is about to explode. I mean, women still are underfunded. VCs don't give them money. We get no support. The big associations are all male dominated. So even if you join them, there's no further support. I belong to a couple of member networks that really don't have the discussions on this, no matter how much they pay lip service to it. And women are beginning to find their own voice amongst each other. Then we move to people of colour, and I cannot speak for everybody, but in all honesty, things have got to change. And I really, really am not going to wait another 20 years now, because we make up part of society. We might not be all of society, but we are part of society. And the very typical middle class, homogenous agency owner or agency person does not represent the United Kingdom or the globe or wherever it is you're working. And if you don't have that variety and understand the different desires and management and executions you need to make happen within your business, then if you're around in 10 years, I would be really, truly surprised.
Can I ask you, this is something I often think about. This is kind of textbook examples that we would study at uni, where they would look at people in investment banking, right? And they kind of identified this type of personality and person or gender kind of does well, and they're the ones who get the biggest bonuses. So what women and minorities within investment banking were trying to do was kind of replicate that kind of behavior shown by the WASPs, I guess, essentially. And the more they would go out drinking, the more they would kind of live that kind of lifestyle, the closer they would be at replicating that kind of archetype of behavior. That would mean that they would get success. Does this mean that we will see a whole new generation of people and agencies that are doing things on their own, like yourself? Like, you are following what your intuition says, and you have the experience, expertise, and probably some wealth behind yourself to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do things my way. Is this something that you think we will see, not just in the agency world, but in the business world as a whole?
Oh, absolutely. Driven, by the way, by those nasty, horrible things, the millennials, who are absolutely bloody amazing. Fantastic. Now, sort of heading to their late 30s, early 40s. This is a generation who's demanded that the world be seen as more empathetic,
Mm,
demanded that we don't subscribe to these archetypes within organizations. And my son is 25, my daughter is 22. So I have the next generation whispering in my ear all the time. And I can
mm,
tell you, that they won't tolerate this. And this has got nothing to do about where they work, it's what they'll buy. It's what
mm.
they'll buy and how they see the world in terms of their consumerism. And so for any business now, what you want is diversity because you want an organization that represents your own customer base.
Mm.
So fair enough, if what you do is sell to one particular middle class, single gender type person, good for you, stick that way. But otherwise, you have to be the people you need to be. And the broader and wider your diversity is, the more likely you will succeed, in my view. And there's plenty of studies, hundreds of studies showing that more diverse organizations perform better by a large.
But what do you think of companies or, like brands that do like this kind of blackwash in a way? Like everyone else within the company is kind of, I guess, white and middle class or male, but the people they choose to kind of feature in their ads, posters or cans or products are all kind of people of color. And it's like they're kind of creating this kind of world that they want to make it look like, but they're not really. And do you think brands like that should be worried because they'll get found out?
Partially. I also think, by the way, that before we all get on our soapboxes, that change is a journey. Even for
Mm,
some of these companies are big ships that they need to turn.
mm,
So overnight, they're not going to attract skill set from a diverse background. They're not going to have either helped people learn the qualifications they want, or they're not going to be able to take someone from another industry and jump them into theirs. None of it is really fast. Okay. There's two things. There is a positive side to that, which is that they are signaling that they are trying to change. If that's married with an internal mission to do that, then there is huge value in that because they will attract people. I always think the saddest thing that I always felt, which is there is no one that looks like me at a senior level. There's no one that looks like me that I can emulate. So the more we can show people who look like me or you or anybody else of color or female or gender or whatever it is, whatever sexual orientation or whatever it is that we need to show, the more we can demonstrate that, the more our own organizations will change that way. And I'm extraordinarily heartened by the number of large brands, really old established brands, that are working incredibly hard at
mm.
changing the game. It's not fast. It's not a fast thing for many of them because they're not going to go up to the sort of, managing director and go, "You're fired."
Mm,
But
mm.
there are many a managing director who's stepping down in place and allowing a place for somebody who is maybe not that very typical person.
And bringing in more open-minded kind of a generation of people who are just they think in a different way. One thing that really stands out with immediate future, Katie, was anyone who's run a business and still maintain a very, very good core client base needs to kind of constantly readapt and pivot and change, especially in your world where you're dealing with social media. Every day there's a new app or a new thing. How do you stay relevant? Just what you mentioned, it's a ship that's very slow turning. How do you actually make sure that you're very agile and you kind of pivot to where, or you sniff out where things are happening?
Because we're the opposite. We're like a little speedboat eating around in circles. So we hire people based on three values: collaboration, curiosity, which I've talked about, but also bravery, courage is our third one. And if you hire people who are naturally curious and brave and will try things out, they will actually go and seek out quite a lot of what's going on. So we were having a chat a couple of weeks ago where myself and a colleague had got onto Clubhouse and we were trying to navigate our way around, and then we got really overexcited. We have a morning call and then we have a 5 o'clock call, mostly where we talk about what we're watching on Netflix. But anyway, me and this colleague of mine, my co-director Belle, and I were just going on and on about how brilliant it was, at which point the rest of the team were all messing up, saying, "We want invites, we want to do it." I think we build play into what we do. everybody is very bought into the idea that we will experiment and try things and watch TikTok in the evenings. And just, I think people within immediate future are quite obsessive about those sort of things. And weirdly, if they're not, they never fit. They don't fit us because we are still pioneering. We're still very, the ethos at immediate future is very much, which is what do we need to know? How do we need to experiment? How do we need to do this better? But with a really strong foundation in marketing, which is looking at it through the lens of how can we have business impact with this and not getting swept away with the hackers idea that more followers matter or that we need to have tons of engagement or blah, 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 blah. We're about, well, how can we move the needle for a business? And that is a slightly different approach to social that is not so embedded on whether Kim Kardashian posts about a product, which is not here nor there.
When you pitched to Sony all those years ago, you mentioned, I think, something like you actually wrote it down. What sounded ridiculous at that time, you were kind of onto something. What sounds ridiculous to you right now that in 20 years or even 20 days or 20 minutes, people will be thinking, oh, this is the next thing? What do you see that is exciting and is something that you had that kind of same gut feeling all those years ago?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. VR. I cannot wait. VR at the moment is all crappy and gaming. I've used a couple of headsets. It's okay. It's not exciting. But have you ever watched the film Ready Player One? I really cannot wait until my life is surrounded by the idea that I can work with colleagues with a headset on because I can see them. Yeah, I think the marketing opportunities are going to be phenomenal. I mean, personally, you see, I'm the sort of person that would have a chip put in my head if I thought it would be helpful. Do you know what I mean? So, but yes, I think VR is interesting. I am endlessly fascinated by AI as well, which is artificial intelligence. Don't think we're there yet. I think there are lots and lots of problems, not least to say the ethics that sit behind it. These are our future. The more predictable, the more we want life to be tailored to us as an individual rather than following the crowd is getting more and more important. I see the surge towards that need and conscious of the environment that we're in. You know, I want to be able to, my shower to recognize me and know that I like a hot shower, as my husband is typical Dubliner and wants his tepid and cool. And so I want my shower to work it out, and I step in it and it goes, here's the stuff you need. And I want to be able to, you know, step out of work onto the Starship Enterprise, and I would like my life surrounded by a mixture of real and not real. I love that, but whether or not that's wholly our future, I don't know.
You mentioned something very interesting in terms of ethics. So what if your shower were to say to you, look, hot shower is bad for you, so I'm going to decide to give you a medium shower? Or your fridge says, you know what, you need to go easy on the calorie intake today. How can we trust these things to look after us, even if it's not in our, or even if it is in our best interest?
Somewhere between iRobot and the Matrix, I would say, yeah, the reality is AI is nowhere where it needs to be for it to be like that. It isn't at this stage. It is doing smart and clever things, but there is whole tranches of people unpicking the ethics of machine learning. And so you're absolutely right. The override will always be humanity. For me, it's the experiences that are the most interesting. It might be just that's how I feel right now after a year of being stuck at home. I don't know. I think the future for marketing is definitely in the visual, experiential nature of VR, with AI being the useful factor, and that's the bit. But you know, none of it is shaped yet. You asked me what was down the line. This may be 50 years away. It might be 20 years away. Who knows? But the point is that is where I've got a weather eye on what's happening over there because it's interesting.
You are in charge of large social media accounts and you have influence through the filter of a brand. What have you learned about people from your experience of creating content for them or putting stuff out there? What have you learned about them, and has anything surprised you?
Oh God, endless it. So I think part of the reason I've loved this, although we've talked a lot about technology, one of the reasons I love social for nearly 20 years is because I am fascinated with behavioral science. I'm really fascinated because the big why for me is, why do people behave like that? Why are they doing this? Why are they interested in this? Let me give you an example. Why was it last July Christmas was trending? Well, Christmas was trending because people were not talking about Christmas. They were giving themselves early Christmas presents because they felt deprived. Why was it in 2019, Veganuary went ballistic, but this year it's barely raised its head above the parapet? And in fact, meat sales, red meat sales, have gone through the roof. That bit is the bit that I'm most interested in. I'm not interested in. I'm not interested. That's the wrong word. Yeah, the technology platforms, the Facebooks, the Instas, the TikToks, the Clubhouses, whatever. That's one thing, right? That's a mechanism, a housing to it. Actually, what makes social interesting, what makes social interesting for brands is nothing to do with whether or not they can do an instant experience or they can TikTok their way to shopping. What really matters is how the customer is behaving, how the consumer is behaving, how the B2B buyer is behaving, because those behaviors are the key. And you get to see them in social in real time, unbiased. Well, slightly biased. They are actually slightly biased by the fact they're on social media. So, but very filtered quite often. And that's the positive. The positive is you get to see the world shifting. You know, we use a tool called Brandwatch, which listens to social media, and they've come out with really interesting things like New Year's resolutions changing from where we normally give up the booze and we normally look at our diets to wanting to spend more time with family and develop our knowledge and read more. It's suddenly a real sea change in our environment. But one of the beauties of Brandwatch is you see these much deeper surge changes that we're seeing right now, which is the desire for sustainability or sustainable goods, the desire for diversity, which are bigger surge changes in the way that we as a society are beginning to move. And then there's a really crappy end of social media, which just is not to do with social media. It's the crappy end of people, the trolls, the polarization, the voice given to those who hate, who like to hate, the love to haters. That side of our society, whether it's social or otherwise, it can fill you with despair. There have been moments, partly because I am menopausal at the moment, which is been a total joy during lockdown, and it has meant that there are moments where you sink into despair, going, the human race really just doesn't deserve to be hanging around. You know, where you're very cynical and you think all people are evil and they like Trump, so they must be. It can be really tough working in social sometimes, and I feel for some of my staff who are sometimes at the front end of some of the trolls. So there are sides to us as a society that are not good.
This is a completely unrelated kind of topic in a way, and this is kind of fits in with it. You're probably more qualified than most people to answer it. Is it up to social media or key holders of the Zuckerbergs and Twitters of the world to kind of police who gets the right to express themselves? And are we in danger of kind of, being in a slippery scale where you kind of, for every, I guess, Alex Jones or extreme person who they ban, the scale just becomes kind of more intolerant, to the point where I think there was a podcast I was listening to the point where if you misgender someone at one point, they will kind of, I don't know, ban you at some point. Like, could that happen? It's a very dystopian kind of thing, but what's your opinion on that?
Oh gosh, I wrestle with this on a personal level. This is not a business thing, because this is about freedom, and it's part of the reason nobody is settling on an answer to this. Do I want Facebook to tell me who I can and can't hear from? Who governs Facebook? Do I want the government to tell me who I can and can't hear from? Frankly, right now, no. I think it's a short answer to that one. I don't trust the government. At the same time, do I want to give voice to people who are so full of hate and violence? They shouldn't. So I'm not answering your question because I don't know the answer. I do think that change will come with education. I mean, education beyond passing your bloody exams, because who cares? I was always rather smart at passing exams. That tells you a lot about me, really. I can pass an exam. Doesn't mean I'm intelligent, but I can pass an exam. Is that we need to be teaching our children empathy, to really walk in another person's shoes, to feel that. We need to be teaching our children to respect other human beings.
Mm.
Not just at home. And there are many home places that do that. We don't teach them that at school. We don't teach them that as a society. And I feel that if we taught people to behave better and understood people better. Let me give you an example. I was a Remainer and was utterly horrified when Brexit what went through, right? But I really had a good think about it. I started listening to the Brexiteers, not the vocal, noisy, hateful people, but the people who were saying, this is why I voted Brexit. Because if you take it away from there's a lot of noise that wants to make this a very polarising debate. What you saw was communities in pain who had been ignored, who felt isolated, and people that the government in the south in particular was wholly indifferent, and that London got it all. Everything was London centric. And when you hear that, you begin to realise that we are, those of us who live in the great metropolis that is London and the home counties, are in a really advantageous position. And we've happily ignored what's going on in the rest of the country. It doesn't bother us. And so this was never this or that debate. It was actually a cry of pain in the only way a part of the society could say, hold on a second, listen to us. And I know that doesn't answer the problem, it doesn't focus the problem, but it does slow you down a bit from wanting to go to the fisherman today and saying, ha ha, told you so. But instead saying, hold on, these are people who are desperately eking a living out of this. Be considerate, be thoughtful. And I think that's the downside with our society at the moment, where it's going, is it's just so easy to go, ha ha, look at you, instead of standing back and saying, one of the reasons that I avoid, although now I'm going to say it, is the terrible phrases pale, male and stale, or white middle class men, or where you can see I carefully try not to. Part of the reason I don't, and there is a really valid reason, and that is because I know lots and lots and lots of men who sit in that category who are not like that. And I will not badge people, because actually lots of men and women and people are doing their utmost to change, and we need to be lauding that and raising that up.
I completely agree with you. I think it's more like not just education. I think it's like empathy and being able to identify with that kind of, you should be able to hold two opposing points of views in your mind and be okay with it. Whereas I think especially what I'm seeing and what I've experienced myself has been either you're in one camp or you're in the other, and there's no in between. I hope this is something we will change personally, because the sign of a truly intelligent person is being able to hold two opposing views and being okay with it. Sometimes you wear one hat, sometimes you wear another. It's not just like this kind of snobbish kind of thing where if you think this, then this is how you should be judged forever, rather than, yes, I may have done something bad in the past, but that doesn't mean this is a reflection of who I am forever. You know, this cancel culture, we're getting deep here, Katy. I want practical tips. I'm a small business. Which social channels should I be in, or how should I approach social media?
Okay, right. So wrong question. Can I be that? Can I be that
Sure.
aggressive on a Friday afternoon? Wrong question. The reason it's the wrong question is, who the hell cares what channel you should be on? What you should say is, where is your audience? Where are they? And what are they doing on each of these channels? Because I can tell you, they're not ubiquitous. For instance, very, very few of my audience is on TikTok. They're just not that age. CMOs at big businesses are not hanging around on TikTok terribly, but they are on Facebook and they are on LinkedIn, and I suspect they're beginning to meander into Clubhouse quietly. So first of all, ask yourself where your audience is, then look at how they're behaving, because sometimes your audience, for instance, if a director of social media will be on Facebook, however, their behavior on social media is very much, I want to learn, not I want to buy. But we work with brands whose audience is on Facebook and it's B2B as a B2B brand, and they're getting the buyers there. So it varies. Everything changes by audience. So you're looking at the behaviors of your audience to decide which channels you should be on and which ones fit and align with your own values. You don't have to be on every single bloody channel out there. You don't. We're on every single bloody channel because we're experimenting. But if you look at where we're really playing, we're playing in the cornerstones that our own audience is. That's where we put our effort. We're on the others just to make sure we know what the hell's going on. So I'd say look at your audience first, then look at their behaviors, then to make a decision. And if you're a very small business, then I would suggest you choose one and do it extraordinarily well. Yeah. And by that, what I mean is the purpose of a social network is to be intimate and close and in the head of your customer. To do that, you do not do that by going, follow me and you can win this and do that. I saw somebody trying to get me to follow their LinkedIn page with the promise that that week I might win an Alexa or some other thing. Yeah. I thought, yeah, wrong audience. You'll just get the wrong people. The people you want are not going to follow you. Who cares? I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in the people I'm interested in. And they're interested in me because they're interested in me. So I think that we have to be very careful about jumping on the shiny. And this is from somebody who loves shiny things, okay? But when you slow it down, you have to go back to your marketing roots and you need to say, right, there's two things I need to do. I need to build my brand. In the case of agencies, that would be, or small businesses, that's your credibility. Yeah. Your brand promise, and I need to drive up interest, and that could be some sort of form of acquisition. And this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to pay, how I'm going to play this out. The content I'm going to create is going to be useful or entertaining or interesting. And every now and then my messaging will signal the right thing. It's a much, much more complex and nuanced approach of both brand and acquisition running at the same time to create content that has some worth and value to your audience, because there's too much blah 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 blah, follow my webinar, do this. I have to show you why there's value in that. Why is there any value in coming along to hear us speak about something, or myself and a panel speak about something? What is the steps I need to help you see, and how can I make it even easier for you? How can I make it simple? How can I give you those nuggets now? And for agencies, the answer is super simple, which is we give it all away. We'll tell you the answer. We don't have a little TM over our processes. We don't care. We'll share it with you. Yeah. And we'll share it with you because if you want to do it yourself, you'll do it yourself. But for many of the organizations we target, they don't have the capacity to do it themselves. So they hire people like Immediate Future.
Brilliant. What's your, I guess, like exit plan, or what does the future for Immediate Future look like?
I don't have an exit plan at the moment. Funny enough, I did about 5 or 6 years ago. I love working. I suspect I shall reduce the hours that I work because I still do full 5 days a week. But I really, really enjoy the job I do. So the future for Immediate Future is for us, I want a new adventure. That's the bit I'm really interested in. So I'm looking at growing. I'm looking at seeing whether or not we can get to be a sizable agency, not massive, not looking to take over the world, but have some fun, get some really interesting and diverse clients. The reality is it's not even about massive growth, because one of the things that I have found, I have learned the most in the nearly 20 years of running a business, is the money doesn't matter. Maybe it's because money is not the issue, but money doesn't matter. Being really uber rich is just not a driver for me. It's not. I don't want a fast car. I don't want to buy an island or a boat or live in a 10-bedroom mansion, right? I'm not inspired by that. What I want to do is solve problems. I love that. I love clients that come to me and we work through the problem together. We change the game and then you see the results, and it's so satisfying. It's like doing a really good puzzle that's taken you bloody ages to do. And then when you're finished, you're like, yeah, feels good.
It's thinking about this over Christmas. It's like being a detective. Like you've got a murder, you've got someone and you've got to work out how did they end up like this. And like what you're saying, that curiosity factor, like Columbo in a way, he's kind of very open-minded. He has his hunches he follows up on and he kind of works things backwards and eventually he'll get the man or the woman who did the deed. Last question, how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, pretty much everywhere. And they do. So easiest way for everybody, because I've been so early on the networks, nearly all my network links are Katy Howell. So it's at Katy Howell Twitter, Katy Howell on LinkedIn, Katy Howell on Clubhouse, Katy Howell on Insta. I'm pretty much, I think I'm just Katy Howell on any of those. We have changed it for Immediate Future. So we are If Tweeter on Twitter, If Tubes on YouTube. And of course, our website is www.immediatefuture.co.uk.
Top tip would be look out for the hair. I think that's the most easily identified. You probably have one of the most distinguished hair in the agency world.
Do you know, it's at this point, right, that I take it off.
Yeah, I should have that. But Katy, Thank you so much. I didn't expect we would have conversations about ethics and the future of humanity and
I know.
all
I
these
feel
things.
I'm slightly uncomfortable because I think I don't. Do you know what? I might be old and I might have been in the industry a long while, but I don't know everything. I'm not some sort of savant. I have no idea. I can only give people my opinions.
I think the best answer I have given to lots of people is I don't know. And it's my goal this year is to say that word more often than not because it's the truth. I don't know. Just work it out yourself kind of thing. Again, thank you so much, Katy.